All right. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We just wanted to make sure that we were live. I am Tara Hohman. I am the Conservation Science Associate here at the Audubon Center at Riverlands. I am joined by Jeff Meshach, one of the Deputy Directors at World Bird Sanctuary. And welcome to today's Bird Friendly Friday on Kestrel Banding. I'm glad you could all join us, and I'm really excited to have you all here today. So first off, I just want to say a thank you to all the partners that helped make this project possible, including our Rivers Project Office, neighbors, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, of course, World Bird Sanctuary, as well as the St. Louis Audubon Society in Ameren, Missouri. In today's program, we're going to be going over a couple different things. The first being our Riverlands Kestrel Project, just a brief overview. Next, we are going to dive into our Kestrel Banding video, showing you exactly what we did throughout the day. And last, we're going to end with a live Q&A with me and Jeff to answer any of your questions on kestrels, nest boxes, and banding. So first, we're going to dive into the Riverlands Kestrel Project. So first, you might be wondering, why kestrels? Why focus in on these birds? Well, they're America's smallest bird of prey, or raptor here, and it's in decline for unknown reasons. They currently have a least concern status, but that doesn't mean that wouldn't change in the numbers that we've been seeing in their trends throughout North America. So these guys are regularly seen on Riverlands. And of course, they have uncertain population trends in our St. Louis region and in our larger bird conservation region being the eastern tallgrass prairies. So one good thing about kestrels is that they can be monitored through nest boxes, which makes it kind of easy on us. And these nest boxes ultimately help us, one, provide nesting opportunities for these birds, but also gives us the opportunity to gain insight on their local population and feed into the broader population. So a lot of data on these birds comes in from community science programs like breeding bird surveys, Christmas bird counts, raptor population indices or migration counts. If you are familiar with Hawk Watch, that's an example of that, as well as nest box monitoring, like what we do here at Riverlands. So a little bit of life history on kestrels. So these birds can be either residential or migratory. Here in Missouri, they are here year round. So we have a unique opportunity to see how they do throughout the year and throughout the different seasons. They prefer any kind of open to semi-open habitat like grasslands, a lot of what we have here at Riverlands, but you can also find them in open habitats off the edge of forests or woodlands or even urban settings. So these guys eat mainly large insects. Their favorites are grasshoppers, but they can also eat small birds, small mammals, and small reptiles. So they're pretty opportunistic in that sense. And they're also considered secondary cavity nesters, which means that they like to nest in those natural tree cavities that you could find out in the wild, but they can't make those cavities. So things like woodpeckers, they'll go in and use those holes that woodpeckers have made in the years past, which also means that they're very good at using nest boxes. So a little background on our project here. This is community scientist based. Our goal with this was to utilize our volunteers from the sanctuary and from master naturalist groups to come out and survey all our boxes and monitor them throughout the season. We received funding for this project through the Creeley Memorial Conservation Grant through St. Louis Audubon Society, or SLAS. Through that, we were able to buy the materials to build 6 boxes here at Riverlands, as well as to buy the equipment needed to monitor them. We actually use a little camera. And we have 11 Kestrel boxes total here. So the 6 that we've made and an additional 5 that were made by the World Bird Sanctuary volunteers. And our monitoring protocol is based on the American Kestrel Partnership, which is through the Peregrine Fund. And that's pretty much your one-stop shop for everything American Kestrels in terms of conservation and habitat needs. So our boxes are spaced at least 0.2 miles apart. If you do look online, you can see that they prefer at least half a mile. But we gave our Kestrels a lot of options here in terms of habitats, whether it was really open, like in this picture next to an ag field, or closer to maybe some trees in a little woodland area. So we have a lot of different opportunities for these birds to pick their preferred space. Our boxes were placed about 11 feet up on mainly Ameren, Missouri utility poles. So one of our partners, we worked through them to get clearance in order to put these boxes on these utility poles. And we monitor our nest with an endoscope camera that's fixed to a long wooden dowel rod so that we can check these boxes from the ground or a small step ladder. So Kestrel reproduction. So Kestrels in our area will start pair bonding or finding their mates in late winter, so around January or February, and they'll start nesting in April. So they can lay anywhere to 4 to 6 eggs, and they'll lay them consecutively, meaning that 1 egg will be laid each day in the laying cycle. So it can take anywhere from 4 to 6 days to lay all your eggs. These eggs can be white to pale pink with brown spotting. Like in our picture here, this is one of our sets of eggs that we had. You can tell that they're pretty creamy, but they definitely have those brown spotting. And the female is predominantly going to incubate these eggs or sit on them, keeping them warm. The male usually provides food for the female during this time, but he'll take his fair share turns of incubating these eggs. So the female will sit on these eggs for about 30 days, incubating them. And after they start hatching, again, 1 day for each chick, it'll take those chicks about 30 days to grow up and develop to the point where they're going to be able to fly and leave the nest, or what we call fledge. So a little bit of our first year success. You can see here that we have 4 chicks that are glaring at you from the box. So our boxes were installed in February, which was a little later than what we wanted, but it still proved to be pretty successful for these Kestrels to find our boxes and get used to them and use them. So in late March, 4 Kestrels started forming pairs and kind of scouting our boxes from what we could tell. In late April, we had our first pair lay their eggs. And in mid-May, our second pair started laying their eggs. So you can also see here that there's a little bit of a gap between when Kestrels are going to lay eggs. They tend to go whenever they see fit. And lucky for us, our first chicks arrived in late May, and those are the ones pictured here. So I am going to walk you guys through a couple photos of the process from our one box that we'll be showing our banding video of. So this image was taken after our female had laid most of her eggs, and you can see here that she's incubating. She was very good and territorial and wanted to stay on those eggs. Here you can see that Dad took a turn incubating the eggs, which was a fun surprise for us. Here next, you can see those 5 eggs that they had been incubating or sitting on. Sorry for all the blank screens, guys. We had to do a quick change beforehand, and apparently my images got switched up. Well, here's the end result. So here we have about, I would say, 3 of our fledged chicks from that box. You can see that they pretty much in this appear just like adults. They're male and female coloration, so males having that gray wing like on the image to your right, females having more black and brown barring like the bird on the furthest right on the image on the left. And so these are pretty close to what adults look like. They just have a little bit more barring on their chest. And so without further ado, we will lead into our Kestrel banding video.
Everything. And so we're just
Kestrels are cavity nesters, and a lot of the natural cavities that can be found out in the wild are few and far between.
We put them here in the towel and they try and run away. They're certainly not going to fly. They're not even close to that yet.
Kestrels, their life histories, they're pretty amazing little predators. One of the smallest birds of prey that you can find here in the United States. Probably the smallest day-active bird of prey in the United States. They have because of their size, usually the smaller the bird is, the shorter its lifespan is. So kestrels that live into their 5th and 6th years, they're old. They're grandparents. They're like our grandparents would be in human years. My name is Jeff Meshach, and I'm one of the 2 deputy directors at World Bird Sanctuary.
Hi, I'm Tara Hohman, and I'm the Conservation Science Associate here at the Audubon Center at Riverlands.
I am writing down these band numbers 11817. We put a size 3B band on both males and females. It doesn't matter with this species, although the males are still a little bit smaller than the females. With some species like the peregrine, the females get a size 7A band and the males get a size 6. So they have to be old enough to make sure that you're putting the right size band on the sex, on the right chick. I'll bring them down in this exact.
perfect.
All of our Kestrel boxes are hung about 11 feet high on mainly utility poles through Ameren, Missouri. The main reason that we use things like utility poles in this project is mainly due to the fact that they are pre-existing structures that are tall and sturdy to where we can get them so high up.
Hiya, fellas. When the kestrels hatch, there is no place for their poop to go, except for all over the inside of the box. So I have gone to kestrel boxes where I've taken the top off the box and stuck my face in, and boom, I am overcome by the smell of ammonia. It is so strong. But the kestrel chicks are like, no big deal to us. And they survive just fine. Hello. That's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Fellas, you're doing great. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, we might have runners. We might have runners, but that's okay. Those that band correctly, and I'm sure that most people that band are always thinking about the birds that they are banding, and they make the process as efficient as possible. We made sure that once I took the birds out of the box, that it took about 20 or 25 minutes to get all of the things that we needed them banded, me writing down the bands as we're banding them, and get them back in the box. I could never say that there is no stress on the birds, but we make the stress as little as possible for any of the birds that we band at World Bird Sanctuary.
Now, Jeff, do we, other than sex and putting on this band, is there any other measurements we can take with them at this age?
It just depends on basically who's banding. I mean, sometimes there's weights taken on them, but you know, there's such good records with ages and stuff with pictures. So the kestrels that we banded today, we banded 2 females and 2 males. They were all about 25 days old.
All gray.
Males have beautiful blue wings, blue feathers on the back of their wings and on their back. Their tail, a male's tail, has got lots of rust in it, like big patches of rust, and closer to the end of the tail there is a dark band, and then right at the end of the tail there's a white band. And then with the females, there's lots of brown and reddish brown and darker brown barring across all of their feathers on their backs, on their breasts, and across their tails. So it's pretty easy to tell between males and females.
So another reason that this is important is because kestrels are actually in decline, and it's not really known why. So helping them reproduce successfully with these given nest boxes and kind of monitoring them throughout this summer season or their breeding season helps us kind of understand them a little bit more. And so this whole project all feeds into the American Kestrel Partnership funded through the Peregrine Fund. And so our data that we collect here is shared with a whole bunch of similar projects elsewhere. And so we're getting a better idea of how kestrels are doing on more of a national scale.
We are trying to teach anyone who will listen. It doesn't have to be just kids. It can be kids that are 95 years old. We are trying to teach everyone about conservation. And kestrels are such a great way to do it because you can put a box up in your own yard. There are plans for people to build kestrel boxes. They are habitat specific, so maybe not every backyard is going to get a kestrel, but it still wouldn't hurt to try to put a kestrel box up close to your backyard, or maybe even in it sometimes, to see if you can get kestrels nesting there. You're helping to conserve the species if you are putting up a nest box, not just for kestrels, but for any bird species that use nest boxes. You're helping to conserve the species. You're contributing to conservation. And we like to make sure that people are learning everything that they can about birds. And one of the best ways to learn is to put it in their hands, to put the learning process in their hands. And nest boxes are a great way to do that. Good luck, fellas. May you have long and prosperous lives.
Everyone, so I hope you enjoyed that video. So now what we are wanting to do is we are going to be having a live Q&A, so I'll stop sharing my screen so that you guys can see me and Jeff. But we are hoping to get any questions that you guys might have. Before we dive in, I also want to say, for more information on kestrels or nest boxes, you can of course contact myself or Jeff, or you can look at the American Kestrel Partnership online. They have a lot of good information along with what we can provide you on kestrels and putting up nest boxes. So with that, I'll go back to letting you guys see us. All right. Hi, everyone. I think we have a little bit of delay between our Facebook Live and here, so I'm going to give it a few minutes to see if we have any questions coming in.
Ask away.
So I can see one so far. So our first question is, what other birds might use kestrel boxes? So there are a couple different other species that might utilize these boxes. They're pretty large, and a lot of birds use nest boxes depending on the size of the hole and of course the size of the box entirely. And so one bird that we get out here at Riverlands that uses these boxes too are European starlings, which are non-native, and of course we don't prefer to use the boxes, but they find it right at home. And so we get those, and another species that can use it depending on the habitat that you're in are screech owls. So if you're in a more wooded area and maybe you won't get kestrels, you can still put up these boxes and maybe get some good screech owls in, which are another fun little bird of prey. Yeah. Let's see. Our next question comes from Andrea, and she wants to know, do we also ban the parents?
That's a good question, Andrea. You have to go through different processes to try and catch a kestrel that's already flying around. And there are many people that do that around the nation. Here at Riverlands and at World Bird Sanctuary, we just banned the chicks that are in the nest boxes. Just a little bit further than that, we rehabilitate injured birds of prey at World Bird Sanctuary. And we always put a ban on the birds that are going to make it back into the wild.
All right, how do you retrieve abandoned bird?
That's a really good question. The bands, they're so small. Oh, gosh, my eyesight's still pretty good, but when it comes to those little teeny tiny numbers, I have to use a magnifying glass to see them myself as I'm reading the numbers off before I put the bands on the birds. So you probably guess that the bird has to be in somebody's hand or your hand to be able to see the numbers on that band. Unfortunately, there are many different ways and instances where kestrels and other birds of prey become injured in the wild. At World Bird Sanctuary, we rehabilitate injured birds of prey, and sometimes we do get bands in, or birds that have been already banded. And as much as we don't like that, because usually there is something wrong with the bird when you have it in your hand, it still gives us information about the bird. That's why we put the bands on. We want to gather information about these birds. Like, for instance, these kestrels that we banded here at Riverlands, they may end up hundreds, even thousands of miles away from here. And if somebody retrieves that band and turns that band number into the bird banding lab, and they've got a really good website you can go to turn a band in, then we gain information about that bird, and we understand, wow, these birds that are nesting here in Riverlands can go way, way far away, and certainly that can happen.
All right, so I'm gonna jump up to another one. So what happens after a kestrel fledges or leaves the nest? So, and I'll let you add on to this if you want. So essentially kestrels, when they fledge, they usually get fed by mom and dad for about a week afterwards. So they still hang around the box. They kind of like the area, but they'll hang out in groups. And I haven't experienced this, I don't know if you have, but I've also heard that if you have multiple nests, that the young will all kind of hang out together.
Yeah, they don't have that territoriality.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have that territoriality. And then once they become adults and they are nesting, they find a box or a cavity to nest in, they start defending the area around that territory, and they won't let any other kestrels come into that territory. The youngsters don't feel that yet. They don't have the hormones that tell them that we should defend. So they do get together with their own kind. They're so used to seeing their siblings that if they see other kestrels, especially youngsters in the wild, it doesn't bother them at all to hang around.
Yeah, so if you come out to Riverlands, you might see a bunch of kestrels hanging out together, yeah. And that's all our chicks who fledge. So this question comes from Andrew, and it is, what is a kestrel's favorite food? I would say grasshoppers. We see a lot of grasshopper parts in our boxes, but we also have found bird feathers. So we kind of have an idea of what they've been eating. And I think that's the two that I've mainly seen.
Yeah, kestrels are what we call opportunists, which means that if the prey is the right size, I mean, an American kestrel won't kill a full-size squirrel. But if they see a prey item that's the right size, whether it be a small snake or a lizard or a small bird or a mouse, small mammal, they will try to capture and kill and then eventually eat that prey item. And so grasshoppers for sure, big grasshoppers in the summer, that's their favorite.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Very plentiful, find them real easy, and yeah, that makes them a big part of their diet in the summer especially.
All right, next question, it's a fun one. do the adult kestrels ever attack when you are checking the boxes?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Very good. I have never experienced a kestrel coming down and smacking me in the head as I'm trying to mess with their babies or getting ready to band their babies. They'll swoop very close and they make a lot of noise. Is the kind of a way to describe the noise that they make. Both mom and dad will scold us, but usually from a distance.
Yeah, I've noticed during our checks here, the most I get is mom, again, or dad just flying overhead, not even really getting too close and just yelling at me saying, hey, these aren't yours.
Yeah.
So they're pretty docile to a degree. So Becky wants to know what responsibilities go with putting up a kestrel or a screech owl box, and what are the minimum duties or maintenance required?
Man, you guys are coming up with some really good questions today. That's an awesome one. It's not a bad thing to clean the kestrel box out on a yearly basis. And usually you want to clean it out in the winter when there's no kestrels. There's not going to be any chance of the kestrels being in that box or any other species that might use the box, for example. So just cleaning it out, maybe putting some new substrate in the bottom of the box. The substrate is just what lays at the bottom of the box. Sometimes you can put a little bit of gravel in there, pea gravel, to help the kestrels out. Sometimes some shavings you can put in, some, especially some aspen shavings you can put in the bottom of the box. So just cleaning that out and putting new shavings or new gravel in the bottom of the box is about all the maintenance that you have to do. Checking the box to make sure that it is still sound, that it hasn't gotten so old and rotten that the bottom's going to fall out maybe, or another piece of the box might fall off. So yeah, very good questions.
Yeah, I'd second that. I know for us, we have a little bit more responsibility since we check these quite often, but yeah, I think the most we're going to do at the end of the season is clean them out. We personally use a mixture of pea gravel and aspen shavings. So raptors don't really make their own substrate, so providing it is very good, especially for
especially falcons. Yep, yeah. Especially falcons. There are no falcons in the world that use nesting materials. They don't bring anything into their nest. So providing a little bit of gravel or a little bit of shavings helps the parents make a little bowl so their eggs stay in one spot. It makes it easier for them to incubate.
Mm-hmm. And then this is the last question I see on here. If there's any more, feel free to add them in. But what habitat is best for a kestrel or a kestrel box? And if you want to put up multiple, how far apart should you put them? So I would say any good grassy open area like a grassland or a prairie, you can have a patch of trees in the middle of that. Some perching is great. I know ours love to use, of course, utility poles. And so that's one perk of using those here. But I would say that, and then depending on your spacing, I guess they prefer about a half mile. Our two nests that we have here on the sanctuary are pretty much exactly a half mile apart. But I know you have experience with nests being a lot closer.
Yes, the habitat's really good. There's lots of grasshoppers, or there's lots of small rodents or birds for the kestrels to prey upon. Sometimes they'll tolerate each other a little bit closer. Remember, I mentioned that they can get very territorial. They don't like any other kestrels in their territory, but their territories become a little bit smaller when there's lots of good habitat, when there's lots of food around for the kestrels. And come on up to Riverlands, and you guys, if you come up here, take a look around. This is really good habitat for kestrels. This short grass, square miles of it here. Again, you don't need quite that much to attract a kestrel, but still, this is really good habitat for kestrels up here.
All right, we got another question. So Kathy wants to know a good website for kestrel box plans. And so I can add this in on the comments afterwards for you to click in later, but just to say it out loud, we got our outline off of the American Kestrel Partnership website. They have plans on, especially if you want to check your boxes, how to make them, what to make them with. All the specifications are there. It's pretty simple after you buy all the material. And so I can share that with you guys after this. And then a follow-up is, can you place a nest box in a tree? And we can piggyback off of this one. Mm-hmm. You can. A tree is a great place. It's pre-existing. You can get a box nice and high, about 11 feet off the ground like you would want. One, we actually have one up in a tree here at Riverlands because we were limited on pre-existing structures. Some downfalls with putting it in a tree is depending on where you are, you might have to fend off other things other than other birds trying to use the box. You could also have to deal with squirrels trying to use the box because squirrels would love it. You also kind of might want to trim some of the limbs to where it's more open and available. If it's kind of closed in, they might not even notice that it's there.
Yeah, and putting a box up in a tree, you may attract another really cool species, which is called the screech owl.
Yeah.
So screech owls don't like their boxes out in the open as much as kestrels do. So if you put it in a tree, you could still get a really cool species in there.
That's true, yeah. All right, I can give one more minute to see if we have any more questions, but otherwise, while we're doing that, again, thank you guys again for joining us today.
Thank you very much. You guys ask some awesome questions.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you so much. That's what we're here for.
All right, well, if any more questions pop up, we will answer them as we see them or as we go. But again, thank you guys for joining us. I hope you learned a ton about kestrels.
Bye for now.
Bye.